Math 3, Unit 6, Section 6. Today we're going to be talking about solving radical equations. So if you go back and look at all of your notes previously, all we've been doing is simplifying. There hasn't been an equal sign in the problem, okay? Now here, if you notice, all of these have equal signs, and whenever there's an equal sign, we know that we can actually solve for a variable, okay? When we are doing that, there's a few steps that have been written here for you. You want to try your best to isolate the radical or expression raised to a rational exponent on one side of the equation. Once you do that, you raise each side to the power suggested by the index so that it eliminates that root. And then you always need to check for extraneous solutions. And over here, this paragraph, they kind of explain why you need to check for extraneous solutions. Is there somebody that would like to read that out loud for us? Thank you.
When you raise each side of an equation to a power, it is possible to introduce an extraneous solutions. Therefore, it becomes very important that you check all solutions in the original equation. A correct solution will give a true statement. An extraneous solution will give a false statement.
Okay, so sometimes we're going to get answers for x that we solve for and we got this value, but when you plug it in, it actually doesn't work. And so basically, for the most part, it's when we get two answers, one of them doesn't end up working, but there are some times that you get an actual answer and it doesn't work, and then the whole problem is no solution. Okay, so anytime you're dealing with roots, you always want to go back and check for extraneous solutions. Okay, so we want to, on this first example, isolate the root. Okay, so what would be the first thing I would do? Add 5 to both sides. Now I have 2 root x equals 8. How do I get the root x by itself? What do I do next? Very good. Divide by 2. Root x equals 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now, what is the index on this root? It's a 2. So in order to get rid of that root, to get x by itself without the root, we would need to do what? You would square both sides. So when I square a square root, that means that I would end up getting a root x times a root x, correct? Which makes a group, and I get x. So I normally won't show that work. It's just that when you have a square root, you take it to the second power. If I had a cubed root, I would take it to the third power. And what happens is it just eliminates that. It eliminates the root. But whatever I do to one side, I also have to do to the other, and 4 to the second power is 16. So we believe that the answer is 16, but we need to check our work, and we need to make sure it's not an extraneous solution. Okay, so we're going to check to see if x equals 16 actually works. What we do is we plug it back into the original equation. So this would be 2 root 16 minus 5 equals 3. What's the square root of 16? 4. So I'm just going to write 4 there. So now I have 2 times 4, which is 8. And is 8 minus 5, does that equal 3? Yes, so it checks out. I'm good. I'm going to go back and go ahead and circle or box my answer. Bless you. Okay. We're going to go ahead and go down. We're going to do this next problem here. Okay, do you think you guys can do this one on your own? Okay, make sure that you subtract 7 first. You have to take care of your addition and subtraction. This 3 is being multiplied. You can't add 7 plus 3 together. Okay, if you got to the point, the square root of x minus 1 equals negative 2, did anybody get to that point? Okay, good. Did you keep going after that? So you would want to stop there. Why? Go ahead.
Because it's no solution.
It's no solution. Can you ever take a square root of something and get a negative answer? No. And so you can stop there and do no solution. Now, if you went on to solve, you would get a value, but if you plugged it back in, it wouldn't work. Okay? And so either way you do that, that would be okay. But let's go ahead and work through this real quick. So what's my first step here on this problem? Very good. Subtract 7. Okay, I have 3 root x minus 1 equals negative 6. Next I would do what? Very good. Divide by 3. We have the square root of x minus 1 equals negative 2. And like I said, at this point, you could just write no solution. Okay, do we have any questions? All right, moving on up here. Am I going to be able to put these roots together somehow? No. Because in order to like add or subtract roots, they would have to have the same exact inside values. And right now these don't. So we're not able to isolate the roots on this one. But I can eliminate roots by doing what? Squaring both sides. Okay? So when I square this side, it is going to eliminate that root. And we are going to have 10 minus 2x. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. What you have to be careful about on this side is that I also need to square the 3. And so when you write this out, we're going to square the 3, which makes 9. And then when you square the root 2x, what does that become? Just 2x. And you have to make sure that you end up multiplying those together. Because the 3 and the root are next to each other, that means multiplication. So we're just squaring each side, and then we can multiply them together. So now I have 10 minus 2x equals, and 9 times 2x is 18x. What will I do next?
Add 2x to both sides.
Very good. Add 2x to both sides. 10 equals what? 20x. And then next I'll, good, divide by 20 to both sides. And when you reduce there, what do you get?
1/2.
Very good. X equals 1/2. But we always need to do what? Check. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do my check over here. I have the square root of 10 minus 2 times 1/2 equals 3 root 2 times 1/2. Okay, well over here what happens? The 2's will cancel out, right? And so you end up with just 10 minus 1, which is what? 9. And what's the square root of 9? 3. On the other side, what happens with these 2's?
Cancel out.
They cancel out. What's the square root of 1?
1.
1. And then 3 times 1 is?
3.
And so it checks out. Okay, do we have any questions? All right. So you want to try to isolate the root if you can. What would I do in order to isolate the root? Subtract 3 to both sides. So I have the square root of 5x minus 1 equals x minus 3. Now what will I do? It could be a solution because we don't know what x is. So over here, it was that the square root equaled an actual negative number. Over here, we have no idea what x is, so there could be a solution. Okay? So how do I eliminate that root? We have to square both sides. So when I square the square root, it eliminates the root. And we have 5x minus 1 equals, how do I square this? We have to write the term twice, right? X minus 3 squared. That actually means x minus 3 times x minus 3. Now you can distribute, or can you guys multiply this in your head? Do you guys want me to explain to you how I multiplied in my head? No, you don't want me to? Or do you just want me to distribute it? Okay, I'm going to show you doing it in my head, and then I'm going to distribute. I'm going to do it both ways. Okay, but I'm just going to talk through it. So it only works when you don't have your coefficients in front. Okay? Anytime you have coefficients in front, you should always do it the long way with factoring and everything, okay? But, so x times x would give you x squared. Remember that your middle number is these numbers being added together. So -3 plus -3 would give you -6x. So you'd have x squared and -6x, and then your last term is those multiplied together. And -3 times -3 would give you a +9. So for those of you that want to do it in your head, you could do that in your head. For those of you that that's just too much to think about, just distribute. X times x is x squared. X times -3, -3x. -3 times x, -3x. -3 times -3, +9. We combine our like terms, and we end up getting x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay, we're good? Did I go too fast? We have an x squared term. Anytime we have an x squared term, we're going to end up factoring. But in order to factor, the x squared term needs to stay what? Positive. So therefore, we're going to move everything to the what? To the right. Okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and subtract 5x and add 1. So I get x squared minus 11x plus 10. And you can put the equals 0 on either side. So now to factor, what is my multiplication number? My multiplication number is 10. My adding number is -11. What two numbers will work? -10 and -1. So does multiply to be 10? They add to be -11. Can I use my shortcut? Yes. And how come I can use it? There's no coefficient in front. Alexis, did you have a question? Oh, thank you. Okay, so we write this out, and we're going to have x minus 10 and x minus 1 equals 0. Again, there's an equal sign in here, so I can solve these. And when I solve, I end up getting the value of x equals 10 and x equals 1. But we need to what? Check our answers, okay? So I'm just going to kind of draw a line here, and I'm going to go check, and I'm going to start with x equals 10. That's what I'm checking first. Okay, so I'm plugging 10 into this problem, so we'd have the square root. 5 times 10 is 50, and 50 minus 1 is 49, plus 3 equals 10, right? And the square root of 49 is 7, and 7 plus 3 does equal 10. So this answer is good. Now I'm going to check the 1. Okay, so x equals 1. 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 minus 1 is 4. So I'm going to have the square root of 4 plus 3 equals 1. Well, the square root of 4 is what? 2, and 2 plus 3 does not equal 1. Do you guys agree? So this answer does not work. And so my only answer is 10. Okay, do you have any questions? All right. Okay, this one, I'm going to give you a couple minutes here. I want you to try this one right here on your own. Okay, and I'm going to come around and check your work, and I'm looking for a volunteer to do this problem as well.
Yeah.
Very Okay, do you want to do it? Sure. Okay. All right, Arturo's going to come up and explain it to us. Okay, so the first thing you're always doing is trying to isolate the variable, or isolate the root, okay? And so he added 3 to both sides. Now he's dividing by 2 in order to get the root by itself. So now we have the square root of x minus 5 equals 5, and then we're squaring both sides to eliminate the root. And he gets x minus 5 equals 25. And then last thing is to add 5 to both sides. So x equals 30. And then we always want to check it. And so he has 2 root 30 minus 5 minus 3 equals 7. So 2 root 25 minus 3 equals 7. The square root of 25 is 5. And then we have 10 minus 3, which is 7. And so it works out. Well done. Don't forget to get your stamp later. Yes. Okay. Any questions? How many of you got it right? Nice. Okay. Well done. Is the root by itself? Yes. So we are going to square both sides. Okay, when I square square root, that eliminates the root. I have x minus 1. Randomly, and I don't know how this happened, it's the same one that we already multiplied out before. Do you guys remember that? And so we know this is going to be x squared, then what? Minus 6x plus 9. What will I do now? Yep. Subtract x, and I'm going to go ahead and add 1 at the same time. Subtract x, add 1, because I want my square to stay positive. Thank you. I knew someone would say it finally. Okay, negative 6x and negative x is negative 7x. 9 plus 1 is 10 equals 0. Okay, my multiplication number is what? 10. My adding number is negative 7. What numbers work? Good. Negative 2, negative 5. Can I use my shortcut on this one? Yes. And so we have x minus 2, and we have x minus 5, and we set those equal to 0, and we solve, and we get x equals 2 and x equals 5. For time's sake, because we're running out of time, I'm going to let you know that the x equals 2 when you plug it back in does not work. And you can even see that here, because you would get 2 minus 3, which is a negative 1, and we know a square root wouldn't give you a negative number, correct? And so 5, though, does work. Okay, moving on here. We have a couple composition functions. This says f of x minus g of x equals 0. This is f of x that we plug in for f of x. This is g of x that you plug in for g of x. So if we write this out, we have the square root of 2x plus 8, and then that's f of x minus x equals 0. Is that good? Okay, we want to get the root by itself, so what do I do now? Add x to both sides, right? Good. I knew you knew it. Okay. The square root of 2x plus 8 equals x. What would be next? Very good. Square both sides to eliminate your root. When I do that, I get 2x plus 8 equals x squared. Which way should I move everything? To the right is correct. Why? You want to keep your x squared positive. Very good. So I'm going to subtract 2x. I'm going to subtract 8. I now have x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. What is my multiplication number? Negative 8. What is my adding number? What numbers work? 2 and negative 4 is correct. Can I use my shortcut? Yes. And so we have x plus 2 and x minus 4. And when we set those equal to 0, what does it equal? Good. And we would need to check these. And again, because of time's sake, I'm just going to let you know that negative 2 will not end up working, but 4 does. Okay. Am I going way too fast? We're good? Okay, last one. Here's our problem. F of g of x equals 24. What do I do first for this one? You always go to your innermost parentheses. Okay, my innermost parentheses are what? G of x. So what happens is, and I think sometimes it's easier to write on here, so this is g of x, correct? So this goes away, and I'm plugging in what g of x is, which is x plus 2. So now, right now, I have f of x plus 2 equals 24. Are we good there? Okay, so next, here is my f of x equation. So this is what's going to go on this side. But instead of writing x, what do we write? X plus 2. So I would then write this. We'd keep the 3. But instead of x, we're writing x plus 2. And then we raise it to that 3/2 power equals 24. You want to get this piece right here by itself. So what would I do? Not distribute the 3. You want to get this right here by itself? Divide by 3. I have x plus 2 to the 3/2 equals 24 divided by 3 is 8. What now? The square root. Well, you know what? Can I show you guys a different way? You could write it the square root like that, but how could you eliminate this? You can just raise it to the reciprocal power. So 2/3. Because you know how powers to powers multiply? If I raise it to the 2/3, these cancel out. And then I can raise this one to the 2/3. So now I have x plus 2 equals, and can we simplify that? How would I simplify 8 to the 2/3?
8 over square root of 2.
Cubed root of 8, right? Because the 3's are index. And then square it. What is the cubed root of 8? 2. Okay, and then 2 squared is 4. And then what is my answer? X equals 2. And you need to check it, but it works out. And that is